Hello, and welcome to the Basics of State Budgeting training. After today's training, if you have questions, please feel free to contact your assigned budget analyst. On today's agenda, we will be covering these points: key players in budget cycle, terminology, allocations, appropriations, expenditure limitations and allotments, revenue and expenditures, classification of employees, budget mechanics, and the components of your budget. Key players in budget cycle. State agencies submit their budgets to the Division of the Budget each year on September 15th. The Division of the Budget analyzes and makes recommendations which are due back to each agency by November 10th. An agency has 10 days to appeal the DOB recommendations to the governor. The governor will then begin making decisions on his or her budget, including concerning agency appeals, and will make recommendations that are released each January at the start of the legislative session. Once the governor's budget is released, the Kansas Legislative Research Department analyzes each agency request, along with the governor's recommendation to the legislature. The legislature considers the agency request and the governor's recommendations and approves a budget at the end of the legislative session. Once the budget has been approved, state agencies implement and execute the approved budget. Most agencies have a one-year budget. So for this budget cycle, that would mean the agency with a one-year budget would submit a revised FY 2027 current year budget and a request for FY 2028. However, not all state agencies have one-year budgets. 19 state agencies are required to submit a biannual or a two-year budget. This change was authorized by the 1994 legislature. These agencies are all regulatory boards that license certain professions such as the Board of Barbering and the Board of Pharmacy. So for this budget cycle, these biannual agencies will submit a revised FY 2027 budget and a request for both FY 2028 and FY 2029. And for the next budget cycle next year, they will submit a revised FY 2028 budget and a revised FY 2029 budget. In July, DOB sent out allocations for the State General Fund and other appropriated funds. In mid-August, IBARS opens to state agencies to begin working on their budgets. Budgets are due to DOB in September, which are analyzed and recommendations are made. As mentioned earlier, DOB recommendations are sent to agencies by November 10th, and agencies then have until November 20th to appeal the DOB recommendations to the governor. Beginning in December, the governor will begin making decisions on his or her budget recommendations. Decisions will be based on agency requests, DOB recommendations, agency appeals, and state general fund revenue estimates. The budget is presented to the legislature in January. With the release of the governor's budget, an appropriations bill reflecting the governor's budget recommendations is also drafted and presented to the legislature for introduction. During the legislative session, both the agency request and the governor's budget recommendations are considered by the legislature. The governor can issue governor's budget amendments to make changes to his or her budget. The GBAs are presented to the legislature for consideration. The legislature will pass a budget bill at the end of the regular session and will adjourn for 3 weeks in April. The budget bill goes to the governor for consideration and possible vetoes. After the 3-week break, the legislature returns for the omnibus session to consider any veto overrides in the budget bill. Also, the legislature can pass a second budget bill called the omnibus bill. The omnibus bill then goes to the governor for consideration and possible vetoes. After the legislature adjourns, if there are pressing budget issues that cannot wait until the next session, then those issues can go to the State Finance Council for consideration. Executive directives are used for various purposes, include establishing a new federal fund for an agency that was not included in the appropriations bill. Terminology. So these are some notable funds within the state budget. First is the State General Fund, and this is a fund for revenues not earmarked or dedicated for special purposes. It is used to finance governmental operations not provided by other funds. The principal sources for the State General Fund of revenue are individual and corporate income taxes, sales and compensating use taxes, severance and other excise taxes, and interest earnings. The all funds are all funds in the state budget, including the State General Fund, the other appropriated funds you see here, special revenue funds, federal funds, and various other funds. The Economic Development Initiatives Fund receives revenues from the sale of lottery ticket proceeds. There are also transfers from the fund to the State Housing Trust Fund and the State Water Plan Fund. This fund is appropriated by the legislature to various agencies, with most of the funding going to the Department of Commerce. The Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund is used for the reduction of state debt, state infrastructure improvements, the University Engineering Initiative Act, the reduction of local ad valorem taxes, and the reduction of the unfunded liability of the KPERS system. The Children's Initiative Fund. This fund receives proceeds from the National Tobacco Settlement, which are appropriated by the legislature for programs and activities benefiting children. The State Water Plan Fund receives a transfer from both the State General Fund and the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. Other receipts come from fees charged to water users, pesticide label fees, fertilizer user fees, and other environmental fines. The legislature also appropriates the State Water Plan Fund to various agencies. The final one are the three building funds. There's the State Institutions Building Fund, and that's used by the Juvenile Correctional Facility that's overseen by the Department of Corrections, the School for the Blind, the School for the Deaf, the state hospitals, and the two veterans homes. The Educational Building Fund is used by the universities, and the Correctional Institutions Building Fund is used for the adult correctional facilities. For systems, you have the Internet Budget and Reporting System, IBARS, which agencies use to enter their budget into each August. The Statewide Human Resources and Payroll System, SHARP, handles statewide payroll. The Statewide Management Accounting and Reporting Tool, SMART, is a statewide accounting system. The governor's budget report contains two volumes. Volume 1 outlines the governor's priorities for the remainder of the current year and the upcoming budget year. Volume 1 is broken down by function of government. Volume 2 includes a more comprehensive profile of each agency by program, which includes the agency's mission, philosophy, goals and objectives, and performance measures. The comparison report is released each July, and it compares the governor's budget report to the legislator's approved budget. And this is also the starting point for the budget year approved amount, which would be FY 2027. The chart of accounts lists the approved amounts. A governor's budget amendment, or GBA, is submitted for consideration to the legislature. A GBA could be submitted for technical corrections, caseloads, emergencies, new grants, and unforeseen expenses. It should also be noted that a GBA should not include items the governor has already reviewed and did not recommend. These are some notable entities within the state budget process. There's the Kansas Legislative Research Department, which handles fiscal and research issues for the legislature. The State Finance Council, which considers budget items when the legislature is not in session. The Office of Information Technology Services, which handles statewide IT functions. Council Reports, which handles statewide accounting. The Office of Personnel Services, which handles all personnel-related questions. Of course, there's the state retirement system, the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System, and the Consensus Revenue Estimating Group, and we will talk about them in just a little bit. So the federal government's fiscal year runs October 1st through September 30th. The state fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. The local government's fiscal years runs January 1st through December 31st, which is the same as the tax year. So in Kansas, the current fiscal year is FY 2027. The budget year is FY 2028, and future fiscal years are called out years, such as FY 2029 and FY 2030. Allocations, appropriations, expenditure limitations, and allotments. So allocations are the first step in DOB planning for the upcoming budget year. They are sent to agencies in July, and it should be noted that allocations are only sent to state agencies that have appropriated funds. So if you do not have appropriated funds, you will not receive an allocations. And only certain funds are allocated. Those are for the State General Fund, the Economic Development Initiatives Fund, the Children's Initiative Fund, the State Water Plan Fund, and the Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund. And state agencies use these allocation numbers as a starting point for budget preparations for the upcoming budget year. So DOB uses the FY 2027 legislative approved budget as a starting point to calculate allocations for FY 2028. And DOB may add or subtract monies to account for specific items such as one-time adjustments, adjustments for debt service, annualization of partial year funding, adjustments to fringe benefits, or other known changes. So an appropriation is an amount of money approved by the legislature for a particular purpose that an agency is authorized to spend during a fiscal year. The entire amount is usually available at the start of the fiscal year, July 1st. The State General Fund is the largest uncommitted revenue source available to the state. It's the fund to which most general tax receipts are credited. Other appropriated funds again include the State Water Plan Fund, the Economic Development Initiatives Fund, the Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund, and the Children's Initiative Fund, and the three building funds. Appropriations bill is the legal mechanism or document that authorizes the expenditure of governmental funds. And this is the basis for the chart of accounts within the SMART system, and it helps guide the accounting system and approved budget in IBARS. There are really two sections to the appropriations bill. There's the supplemental part, and that's changes or adjustments to the current year budget, which is FY 2027. And then there's the mega portion of it, which would be the FY 2028 or the budget year budget. Omnibus that can contain adopted GBAs or new appropriations needed to implement bills enacted by the legislature. In recent history, sometimes the legislature combines the above types into one bill and does not pass a separate omnibus bill at the end of the session. And the legislature did just only pass one budget bill for the 2026 session, and the most recent statutory citations are listed below. Expenditure limitations are specific to special revenue funds, and special revenue funds receive funding from a dedicated source of revenue. And there are two types of special revenue funds. There's the limited and the no limit. A limited fund has a spending cap on it that was approved by the legislature in the appropriations bill, and a state agency cannot spend more money out of that fund than what's approved by the legislature. A no limit fund, well, there is no limit. However, if an agency is going to deviate significantly from what was submitted, they need to provide justification. No limit funds can become limited if they are not managed responsibly. Rescissions and allotments are procedures under which expenditure authorities are legally reduced when resources appear insufficient to cover appropriations. And there's a description there of both rescissions and allotments, and the statutory citations for both of them. And if you have questions about either of these, please reach out to your assigned budget analyst. Revenues and expenditures. The consensus revenue estimating, these are the official estimates for revenues to the State General Fund. So this process determines how much money may be available to spend, and this group meets 2 times a year in November and April, and the statutory citation is KSA 75.6701, and this statute outlines the group's responsibilities. The governor's budget uses the November estimates as a base, and the legislature starts with the governor's budget and then can incorporate April estimates during the session, and it also adjusts for enacted legislation. Members of the consensus revenue estimating group include representatives from the Division of the Budget, the Kansas Legislative Resource Department, Department of Revenue, 3 consulting economists, 1 from the University of Kansas, 1 from Kansas State University, and 1 from Wichita State University. And the most recent up-to-date memos and SGF revenue receipts are posted on the DOB website, and the address is there below. So there are 4 category types of expenditures that make up state operations, and we consider these the day-to-day business of state government. There are salary and wages, contractual services, commodities, and capital outlay. Also, there are other expenditure areas, including aid to local governments, and these are payments made to local units of governments. Most have taxing authority. Examples include the general aid to school districts, disaster relief, and special city and county highway aid expenditures from the Kansas Department of Transportation. Other types of expenditures are other assistance, grants, and benefits, and these are payments to individuals and agencies that are not governmental in nature. There's debt service, and these are principal and interest for the payment of bonds. Capital improvements include rehabilitation and repair projects, new construction, and remodeling of state-owned buildings and facilities. Also, capital improvements include the debt service principal payments. Shrinkage is money reduced from salary and wages and reallocated, if possible, under the assumption that some positions will be vacant. If possible, agencies should reduce FT positions that are vacant for multiple years to be more accurate. This is only a budgeting tool and will not be found in the SMART system. Agencies should be cautious about moving funds from salary and wages to other operating expenses in FY 2027, as there is a budget proviso that requires the budget director to lapse vacant positions as occurred in FY 2026. So, non-reportable and off-budget expenditures. These are disbursements such as refunds, advances, and investments which do not represent governmental cost. So for off-budget expenditures, in order to avoid duplication, as an example, the Department of Administration has a printing plant. Dollars are spent by state agencies for printing services. The same dollars that are spent by agencies are spent again for operating the cost of the printing plant. To avoid reporting expenditures twice, agency costs are treated as reportable, and the printing plant's costs are non-reportable or off budget. It's very important to note that appropriated funds must be reportable because they always pay for costs that are the regular cost of state government. Those reportable funds again those appropriated funds again are the State General Fund, the Economic Development Initiatives Fund, the State Water Plan Fund, the Children's Initiative Fund, the Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund, and the 3 building funds. So there are really 2 types of transfers. There's a demand transfer, and this is the expenditure of monies from the State General Fund, which is determined by a formula in state statute. Some examples include capital improvement state aid and capital outlay state aid concerning school finance. A revenue transfer is more common, and this is authority in the appropriations bill to transfer all or any part of revenue in a particular fund to another fund, either between agencies or within an agency. It's very important to remember when you submit your budget in IBARS to include accurate transfers. Classification of employees. So the first type of employees are classified positions, and these are regulated by the Kansas Civil Service Act, and classified employees can make appeals to the State Civil Service Board regarding dismissal, demotion, or suspension. They're included in the agency's FTE position count in the budget, and they receive full benefits based on the percentage of time of the position. Temporary classified positions do not exceed 999 hours of employment in a 12-month period. They are not included in the agency's reported FTE position count in the budget, and they usually do not receive benefits. It's also important to note that former Governor Brownback in 2015 overhauled the Kansas Civil Service protections. After this change, employees were allowed to voluntarily move into non-civil service positions, while most new hires are now in the unclassified system. Unclassified positions serve at the pleasure of the appointing authority. They are included in the agency's reported FTE position count in the budget. They receive full benefits based on the percentage of time of the position. Temporary unclassified are not included in the agency's reported FTE position count in the budget. They are limited to 999 hours in a year. Fringe benefits are at the discretion of the appointing authority. Non-FTE unclassified permanent positions are temporary unclassified. They have ongoing duties and receives retirement and other benefits, and they are included in the agency's reported FTE position count in the budget. For budget reporting purposes, an agency's FTE count is the sum of regular classified positions plus regular unclassified positions plus non-FTE unclassified positions. So although the legislature approves a count of FTE positions for each agency, there is currently not an FTE position limitation in the appropriations bill. Budget mechanics. An appropriation is the amount of money your agency has been authorized to spend by the legislature. A reappropriation is the amount of money from that appropriation that has been left unspent at the end of the fiscal year, which carries forward and becomes part of the approved budget for the following fiscal year. It's important to note that if reappropriation language is not included in the appropriations bill for any line of appropriation, any unexpended amount will lapse. This means it will revert back to the fund from which it was made and becomes part of the unappropriated balance in that fund. An encumbrance is an accounts payable tied to a specific fiscal year, which prevents commingling of monies appropriated to specific fiscal years. So this ensures that FY 2027 monies are used for FY 2027 expenditures. And this is considered an expenditure for budgeting purposes. So this is an example of an appropriation for the Attorney General. The first part's the appropriation. So for FY 2027, for operating expenditures, the Attorney General has been appropriated $9.2 million from the State General Fund. The next line is that reappropriation language that allows any unencumbered balance in this account in excess of $100 as of the end of FY 2026 will roll forward and become, or shift forward and would become part of the from FY 2026 into FY 2027. The next line is for official hospitality, and for this particular account, it cannot exceed $2,000. And just as a note, if you have official hospitality and you need to make an adjustment to your hospitality limitation, please make sure to tell your budget analyst, as these amounts are in the appropriations bill and can only be changed when considering another appropriations bill by the legislature. And the final issue is just a transfer, as I talked about earlier. So this particular transfer here, um, the Director of Accounts and Reports will transfer 460,593 from the Kansas Endowment for Youth Fund to the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement Fund of the Attorney General on July 1st, or at the start of FY 2027. This here is transfer authority that allows the Attorney General to transfer an item from one state general fund appropriation to another state general fund appropriation within the agency. However, in order to do this, the Attorney General has to get the approval of the Director of the Budget, and a copy of the transfer must be submitted to the Director of Legislative Research. So there are 9 fund classes to which revenues are receipted. The 1,000 series is for the State General Fund. The 2,000 series is for special revenue funds. The 3,000 series are for federal funds. And the 4,000 series is for the State Highway Fund, which is going to be mainly the Kansas Department of Transportation. 5,000 series are enterprise funds, and these usually account for charges for services usually of a commercial nature rendered to the public for compensation. 6,000 series are intergovernmental service funds, and these are non-reportable funds that account for the provisions of goods and services by state agencies for other state agencies. 7,000 series is the trust funds, and these are funds containing monies held and dispersed by the state acting as a trustee, agent, or custodian. The 8,000 series is the capital funds, and the capital funds contain the 3 building funds I mentioned earlier: the state institutions building fund, the educational building fund, and the corrections institutional building fund. And the final 9,000 series, these are clearing funds, and these are non-reportable funds into which monies are transferred from other funds and then dispersed for a particular general expenditure, such as payroll. So this is reading an account number in SMART. So the business unit is the agency number, which is 08200, which is the Attorney General. The fund number is 1,000, which is the State General Fund. The budget unit's like a sub-account of the State General Fund, and for this particular one, the budget unit number is 0103, and then the budget period is fiscal year 2027. So this is a picture of the Attorney General's State General Fund chart of accounts within the SMART system. So the first one, again, is the business unit, which is 08200. Then the fund is 1,000. The fund description is the State General Fund. The budget unit for this one is 0040. The description is litigation cost. The budget period is 2027 or FY 2027. This is an appropriated fund, and the appropriation limitation for this particular appropriation is $78,000. System structures. So expenditures fall into one of 7 classification. The 5100 series is for salary and wages. The 5200 series is for contractual services, which are payments for various services, including communication, travel, and utilities. The 5300 series is for commodities, and these are payments for consumable materials, supplies, and parts used in the operation of the agency. 5400 series is for capital outlay, and these are for such items as office equipment, machinery, furniture, and motor vehicles. The 5001 is for grants, claimed, and shared revenue. And these are, again, can be aid payments to counties, cities, school districts, and other local governments with taxing authority. Then other assistance are payments made on behalf of persons, including public assistant benefits, retirement benefits, employment benefits, and so forth. The 5600 series is debt service, and these are for the payments of principal and interest on bonds that have been issued. And the 5700 series is non-expense. And these are disbursements such as refunds, advances, and investments which do not represent governmental cost. Revenue classifications. So 4100 series are for taxes. 4200 series, and that's for agency earnings. And this is revenue from agency earnings, which is generally derived from fees or services performed. The 4300 series is for compensation, and this is for the use of state-owned money and property such as interest earnings. The 400 series is for gifts, donations, grants, and contributions received from public and private sources. The 4500 series is for other revenues, and this is source of revenues not classified elsewhere. And the 4600 series are sources of receipts that do not constitute revenue, such as an encumbrance adjustment. So for every type of expenditure or revenue that falls under the classifications discussed in the last two slides, there's a 6-digit code called an object code. For example, salary and wages expenditures fall under the 5001 series expenditure classification, and the 510 100 is a 6-digit object code for pay for regular classified employees. Likewise, taxes fall under the 40100 series. And 410110 is a 6-digit object code for real estate and other property tax. Reduced resources are targeted reductions to a program or agency budget to meet the allocation provided by DOB in July. There's usually a dollar amount that equates to a predetermined percentage for all agencies. Each item would be submitted as a change package. DOB is not requesting a reduced resources package for this year. Had that been required, you would have seen them in your allocation sheet sent to you by your budget analyst. So this is a PowerPoint slide of a tree in IBARS. And this is for the State Historical Society. So level 1 represents the agency, which in this case, the agency number is 288, which is the State Historical Society. Level 2 represents the agency name or division. This agency has no division, so there are 2 zeros for the agency name. Level 3 represents the SMART program level, and level 4 represents the department ID. So within the state government, there are 6 functions. Function number 1 is general government, and that's going to include your judicial branch, your legislative branch, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Administration, all your licensing boards. Function 2 is human services, so that's going to contain Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services, the Kansas Department for Children and Families. Function 3 is education. That's made up of the Department of Education, or K through 12, and higher education. Function 4 is public safety. That's your Department of Corrections, your Highway Patrol, the State Fire Marshal. Function 5 is agriculture and natural resources. That's your Department of Agriculture, the State Fair, the State Water Office. And Function 6 is solely the Kansas Department of Transportation. So for budget adjustments, if an agency is requesting additional funding, say from the State General Fund, in the current year FY 2027, that needs to be submitted as a supplemental change package. So it would be submitted as a change package in IBARS, and you'd also have a description of it in your budget narrative. If you need additional state general funding beyond your FY 2020 allocation, then you would submit that as an enhancement. That would also be a change package in IBARS, and there would also be a description of that in your budget narrative. Requests must also include impacts on performance measures, and not every change has to be attached to a change package for no limit funds, but agencies should still provide justification. Components of your budget. So these are the different components of your budget, including the narrative is the strategic plan, program narrative and sub-program narratives. You should also include a statutory history, an agency-wide overview, and then your actual position numbers for FY 2026. And if you do need new funds, please make a notation in your narrative so your budget analyst knows to include them in the appropriations bill. And then if you're requesting a FY 2027 supplemental or an FY 2020 enhancement, please include a summary of those, and please list those out by priority. And then just expenditures by each expenditure class, salary and wages, contractuals, by object code. And also please include a explanation of your revenue to your various funds in your budget narrative. So for performance measures flow logically from the strategic plan. You have outputs, and that's the number of units of a project or service provided. Outcomes are measures that the measures that ultimate benefits associated with a program or service, also known as results, measures should be reliable, consistent, obtainable, and quantifiable. And right below there's an example of for seatbelts. The objective is to reduce fatalities due to noncompliance with seatbelt law. The strategy is to conduct additional hours of seatbelt law enforcement. Outputs are the number of hours of enforcement and the numbers of citations. And the outcome is the percentage or number of motorist fatalities caused by noncompliance with a seatbelt law. Measures to include key measures developed with DOB from prior years, measures related to supplemental and enhancements, and measures related to outcomes that serve the agency mission. Tips for estimating future measures: work within your agency to provide meaningful future estimates. Try to avoid keeping measures flat, and show how additional funds would affect the measures. Enhancements that do not demonstrate the effect of on performance measures may not be considered. Other components of your budget include the capital improvements plan. So if your agency does have capital improvements, make sure to include that in your budget. Not all agencies have capital improvements. And then the children's services budget. So for the children's services budget, if you have one, please make sure to include the number of children served and costs for FY 2027 and FY 2028. And these are just some forms. The first are forms generated by the budget system. The 402 and SR5A are agency expenditure summaries by program and funds. The 404 shows your fund revenues, and the DA 406, 410 are your expenditures by record class and funds. Forms generated outside the budget system are the DA 400, which is going to be your agency narrative and have your program description and performance measures. The 405 is your explanation of receipts that you're going to include with your budget narrative. 417 is for your children's services, and then the DA 418 is for your capital improvements. IBARS opens each year in mid-August, and budget submissions are due to the division of the budget by September 15th. These are just some key resources to use. There's the DOB website, which contains performance-based budgeting resources. The IBARS user manual, our two official publications, the Governor's Budget Report, the Comparison Report, and it also has the FY 2028 budget instructions for agencies. You can also look at the session laws of Kansas, and of course, please reach out to your budget analyst. So this concludes the training. So if you have any questions at all, as always, please contact your budget analyst. We are here to help you. Thank you for listening.